Welcome back to Decentralounge, brought to you by GlobalStake, your truly decentralized SOC 2 Type 2 certified institutional bare metal blockchain infrastructure provider. I'm your host, Ryan Hazinski, head of protocol partnerships, along with my co-host, Wyatt Clancy, our VP of growth. Instead of our typical founder or protocol guest, I'm joined by our friend of mine, Joe Farren, who owns and operates FutureSport, a company at the intersection of sports, media, and emerging technology. Joe works closely with brands, creators, and technology companies to help them navigate the rapidly evolving Web3 landscape, particularly around fan engagement, immersive digital experiences, and growing convergence between sports, gaming, and blockchain. Over the past few years, he's been involved with a range of projects across the ecosystem, consulting on Web3 sports initiatives and helping organizations explore how blockchain, digital collectibles, and virtual experiences can unlock new forms of community and engagement. Today, we're going to talk about Joe's journey into the blockchain industry, how he approaches building relationships and opportunities across the space, and where he sees the intersection of sports, entertainment, and Web3 heading next. Joe, welcome to Decentralounge. Really excited to have you today on this conversation. And why don't we just start off a little bit about how you got involved in this space overall of Web3?
Cheers for that intro, Ryan, and great to be on the show. So my journey into the Web3 space kind of was precipitated in the NFT boom, 2020, 2021. I think everyone remembers those heady days. And essentially, I've been kind of passively investing in crypto through our mutual friend, David Chapman, also at GlobalStake. And he put me onto crypto in 2019. I was just on Nexo, like sort of casually stacking Ethereum, Bitcoin. And then the NFT boom happened. And then I think that kind of intersected with a lot of the work I was doing in sport, which was around how to use creative tech to create new forms of fan engagement. So I was working at Hawkeye Innovations, who are the leading sports data tech company who build out different fan engagement products and experiences for the likes of the ESPN, ATP, NFL. And then NBA TopShots happened. And that just seemed like a really interesting crystallization of a new technology platform and unlock and a new way to kind of enhance engagement in media and sport in a really new and interesting way that I hadn't really seen before, i.e. you can actually own a piece of something you love, and the idea that NFTs actually unlock a new pre-existing fan behavior, i.e. collecting, but in a new digital way for digitally native audiences. And then spend a lot of time wasting a lot of money, as it turns out, on sports NFTs. So like Gary V's project, the Crawley United NFT, I bought a couple of those, and then working on a ton of different projects. But that was the kind of the beginning of the journey for me. So yeah.
Very cool. Well, one of the things, I mean, how did this develop into now having your own company, FutureSport? This is something that you've kind of built from the ground up and really done some pretty impressive work with the Web3 space in particular. So kind of curious to see how that journey evolved from you just becoming somewhat passively interested through our mutual friend David and NBA TopShot, which was certainly all the rage. But how did that lead you into where you are today?
Yes, I mean, we can throw up a couple of examples of the Web3 sports projects I worked on. So this was my main leap into the space, and it was a project called Australian Open Artball. And I don't know if you can roll the video, Ryan, but essentially it was digital sports lottery meets sports data. So you bought a piece of generative art called your Artball, and then using sports data, which was connected, this is how the tie into my old company happened, that where the last point in the match landed in your plot attached to your piece of digital art, you won extra prizes, extra utility. And it was kind of a case of being right place, right time in terms of me being interested in the space, and then us as a company connecting with the Australian Open about the opportunity of them using our data. But we did 6 million in primary sales. And then I, basically the head of the project at the Australian Open, tapped me on the shoulder to come across and lead on creative strategy for year two. And we ended up sort of selling in a similar concept to the US Open Golf. So similar concept, but dividing up the green and then essentially using that to plot on sports data to digital lottery tickets effectively. So this was kind of my main entry point into the space. So yeah, I guess we can just
transformed the most iconic piece of the Australian Open, the court. Introducing AO Artballs, an NFT art collection that let fans purchase their very own digital piece of the court. Each ball was allocated a section of the playing area, and in a world first, we connected line call technology to digital assets in real time. So every match point during the Open rewarded a fan who owned that part of the AO court. Supporters unlocked digital wearables, content, and could even watch the game live in a metaverse replica of the arena. Fans flocked to our...
So I guess this was really the first time that some people had used sports data intersecting with digital collectibles in a kind of novel and new way. And I think why it worked was, one, it was just kind of it kind of caught the zeitgeist, right? That kind of NFT boom. But it also unlocked kind of pre-existing fan behavior, right? In terms of fans really like to bet, gamble, and obviously Web3 audiences like to do the same. So it kind of really augmented existing fan Web3 behavior, but in a really new, novel and creative way that hadn't been done before. And we ended up winning a Cannes Lion advertising award and a sports tech award as well for that. So I kind of really used that as my calling card to then go on and work with a ton of other projects in the space, connecting the best Web3 projects to the biggest sports rights holders.
No, yeah, you certainly done. You have some big names under your belt, like Animoca Brands. You just had a huge deal with Pudgy Penguins, so would love to dive into more of that as well, just to kind of share some additional experiences you've had in Web3.
Yeah, sure. I mean, so then after Artball, I ended up going and consulting with Animoca Brands across various sport portfolio projects, including a digital collectible project with the AFL called Mint Rookies, which was, or AFL Mint, which was essentially quite similar to NBA TopShot. But what are your guys' thoughts on sports NFTs these days? Do you think it's something that's still going to exist, or how are you sort of seeing the sports NFT landscape evolve yourselves?
I mean, personally, I think that we're going to continue to see sort of the proliferation of digital collectibles. I mean, even just look at how hot Pokemon has been in terms of there are multiple platforms now in the Web3 space, like BZ, for instance, where they have claws where people go in and then they take out, a digital collectible. They can tear open packs. I feel like this is just the beginning of a trend. Our world, as I like to point out to people, is becoming increasingly digital, not less so. So I can see a time in which, even if the NFTs are, slightly in a downtrend at this moment here in 2026, I don't see this as a trend disappearing anytime soon. And especially because people who are younger than myself that are so digitally native, they're going to continue on that collectible journey, especially those who are interested in sports in this way. So I think that what you're building, Joe, is incredible, because it's opening up that opportunity to so many different people who maybe are new to the collectible space in a digital way, or vice versa, like me. Like, obviously, I don't have a whole lot of digital collectibles, but then the people who are native, who are younger, obviously, they're already synced to all this as a trend. And so I can see them only adopting it even more so. Wyatt, you're younger than me, so I mean, maybe you can chime in here too.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think there's absolutely a great spot for it. I think it's all going to be based around utility and the amount that, current sports owners, specifically in the US, you think about the NFL and the MLB, how those owners allow, retail investment into the space will be very interesting. I mean, you're seeing that with private equity in the NFL now. But one of my questions for you would be, what would your, 10-year, if there were no barriers to entry, goal for an NFT in the sports ecosystem to be? What would be the utility of the NFT? What sport would it be in? And no barriers to entry.
I think I've been thinking about this a lot recently, but I do think there's the kind of piece around connecting live sports data to digital collectibles in a way that's kind of a digital collectible can evolve over time, and kind of intersecting with a more, I guess, modern day narrative and meta around prediction markets, right? Like prediction markets are just another case of, you know, a new unlock of that age-old fan behavior of betting and essentially speculation, right? So, I mean, what I'd be interested to see if someone like a Kalshi or a Polymarket suddenly revives as a sort of a horizontal product suite, the kind of similar product to AO Artball, because, you know, people are always going to be interested in speculating, but what are the kind of parallel adjacent fan behaviors or products that you can build to then keep engagement and retention on those platforms once you've reached a certain saturation point, right? So that, I do think that's be an interesting cross section of, you know, a proven gaming loop that was provably sticky, but with a current today's meta.
I guess kind of a follow along for that as well would be what sports are you most interested in penetrating the market of, and what sports are you noticing the biggest pushback from the standpoint of allowing you to create products within their ecosystem?
I mean, speaking transparently, I think the biggest issue when you have Web3 or blockchain or emerging tech startups pitching into sports teams is that, one, they just don't know what the entry point is, right? In sport, there's so many, it's such a quagmire of stakeholders you have to deal with, and so many different folk who you'll have to get past in order to get a project away. And two, I do think half the time when Web3 and emerging tech companies are pitching sports brands, it's always from a case of them talking about their own product versus actually like what problems are you solving for the rights holder that's going to unlock new value for that they won't be able to access with legacy technology, right? And then two, it does, I think the biggest barrier to entry for a lot of these sports teams, it does come down to a conversation around sponsorship and marketing, and rightly or wrongly, whether or not you think that is gatekeeping or a bad thing, these companies have built up the most loyal global fan bases. You know, it's like the likes of City have, you know, up to 1 billion fans globally across their channels, and ultimately that's their main revenue source of how they make money and how they keep the lights on for the whole team and able to like fund transfer. So it does also then come down to, okay, what is the right commercial model that means that, you know, the sports team gets some kind of remuneration, but equally doesn't kind of screw over the startup or Web3 brand as well. Because from the flip side, there's a lot of deals in the market at the moment, whether that's, you know, probably won't name too many names, but we all see those sponsorships get signed, and half the time the ROI isn't there, and a lot of the time the ROI isn't there because buying the sponsorship is only part of the deal, right? Like it's actually then what you do to activate your brand and reach those new audiences that check is unlocked, that actually really then converts the ROI into meaningful value for the Web3 brand or startup that's written the check. So, and I think only a very few select group of teams really have that in-house expertise of digitally and Web3 native partnership managers to really actually kind of pay back that investment. And City was one of them, but, you know, the likes of, I'd say, McLaren as well. A guy called Max, who's doing my role at Manchester City, is doing a great job over there. So I think those are the kind of big watch outs on both sides, I'd say.
Well, one of the things you mentioned Man City, and this is obviously a huge client of yours, and Manchester City, as you noted, is one of the biggest, most popular, you know, brands in the EPL, the English Premier League. And so kind of curious to learn more about your role with the EPL or with Manchester City in particular, and like what you've been guiding them toward, because you're obviously acting in a consultative capacity for them. Is it fan engagement? Is it something about, you know, just getting the blockchain infrastructure, if you will, interested in being partnered with somebody like a Manchester City?
Yeah, so my kind of relationship with City started out I worked on a digital collectible project with them as a consultant, which was like an immersive art project to celebrate when they won 4 Premier League titles in a row, and then essentially an opportunity came up to go in-house and lead the fan innovation team, which was essentially a dedicated team to activate and onboard emerging tech collaborations and new partnerships. And the goal of that unit was partly around how to reach new audiences with emerging technology. So we helped activate brands like OKX, Socios, and as you said, we were involved in the Pudgy Penguins collab as well. So yeah, it was kind of a dream gig, to be honest. And then, moved out to the States 3 months ago, but still, very close to the City team and all the work they're doing.
And building on that, especially with City, I'm a huge football fan myself. So how is the interaction and, kind of enthusiasm from the actual players, whether it be in the AFL, the Prem, any of these leagues? What is the actual enthusiasm behind the players?
In terms of in regards to some of the emerging tech activations?
Yeah.
I think, to be fair, I think a lot of them, I'd say a large proportion of them are crypto native, are involved passively in the ecosystem. And then especially I think gaming is even a bigger passion point for a lot of the players. Like when we did a Roblox activation last year at City, and you can really tell compared to a lot of the other, when they have to go and do player appearances where they basically stand in front of a camera and then pretend to promote like a drinks brand or whatever, they actually really are engaged in the content because they're crypto and gaming natives themselves. So it is interesting seeing them engage with like the content and material more than other brands, which I think is kind of interesting, and definitely makes it more enjoyable when if you want to shoot with them.
Well, I mean, this gets to the point I was saying earlier in terms of just the younger folks that wanting to be there or just natively interested in this, like these footballers, right? I got to imagine are probably the vast majority of them under 25, right? It seems like so many of these kids literally are like getting out on the pitch at 16 years old. So it makes perfect sense that they would be just natively interested in these things, and gaming especially being a huge vertical too. So I mean, thinking about where these trends are all going, do you see that solidifying around a particular, like, do you think gaming is going to be the thing? Do you think it's going to be more, because for instance, FIFA signed a big deal with where they have the FIFA game that was on handhelds and it was licensed and using blockchain technology in the background. Do you see this trend continuing into the future as more people come online and get involved in Web3?
Yeah, I do think gaming, I think there was some interesting, I think the FIFA Web3 game on Polka, I can't remember, what was it called again? I'm blanking on it, but that game on Polka, I think had some pretty good initial numbers. But I do think in terms of the gaming pieces around going to where people are already at in terms of like starting and marketing a game from scratch is super hard, right? Like people don't want to download an app. Like there's app fatigue. People don't want to download a new app, and the amount of this is kind of note from being involved in gaming activations. People are just really reticent to download a new gaming app. Whereas I do think there's probably a lot of green space opportunity for Web3 brands to activate on Roblox, and I say that because having activated on Roblox with City and seeing like the absurd numbers of you can get where you fish where the fish are, right? It's like 350 million monthly active users on Roblox, which is crazy. And, in a 2-month activation, we got 50 million unique players and 500 million impressions. So like the ROI of Roblox, not just from a kind of a Web2 brand, but I'd say for like an emerging tech and Web3 brand, because the audience is aging up on that platform, right? So I think something now 60% of players on Roblox are now above the age of 18. So especially from a kind of regulatory standpoint, I do think it's green space that I'd say Web3 brands and startups should be looking at, like how they can activate audiences and use Roblox as a distribution channel, because it's just the numbers are silly.
Well, you know, I hope the next time that we're in London for a conference, we can get a car over to Manchester and maybe see a game together. I know you're in the States now, but hopefully we overlap. But I could talk about that specifically for hours and hours, and hope to meet you in person and do that soon. But until then, you know, where can people follow along, get the latest updates from you and your company?
Yeah, so people can find me sorry to the DJs, but I'm not the biggest on X, because most of the people I work with are pretty B2B, old school on LinkedIn. So best place to follow me chatting about emerging tech is on LinkedIn, Joe Farren. And then I've also just started a Substack, FutureSportCo is me on Substack, where I talk about all things emerging tech and sport. And yeah, if there are any emerging tech blockchain brands who are interested in connecting with some of the biggest names in sport, feel free to reach out.
We'll be sure to link all of those in the description on the video for the podcast. Again, thank you for taking so much of your time today to explain this to us, Joe. This is a really fascinating episode, breaking from the normal. This is not something we normally get the chance to cover. So you've been a fantastic guest. And again, those who are interested in working with Joe, and maybe if you are somebody who is in the blockchain space and wants to get a hold of Joe, we'll make sure to have all that information available, from his Substack to his LinkedIn. And for those of you who are watching or tuning in today's episode of Decentralounge, thanks for taking the time to spend with us. And we'll see you next time on the next episode of Decentralounge. Take care, everybody.